There is a warning on the national weather map right now that shouldn't exist yet. The Storm Prediction Center is widely considered one of the most cautious scientific institutions in the country. They do not use aggressive long-range probabilities unless something in the data is screaming at them. But they just posted a 15% severe probability 4 days in advance. To put that into perspective, in the language of meteorology, it is the meteorological equivalent of a doctor calling you at midnight. They don't do it unless the test results are genuinely alarming. And right now, the results are alarming. Because when we step back and look at the macro picture, we are not just tracking a single storm system. We are watching a continent under siege from multiple, overlapping extremes. Over the Central Plains, supercells are loading 3,000 joules of energy. To the east, 8 rivers are flooding simultaneously in New York. To the northwest, Montana is disappearing under a foot of snow. To the southwest, driven by relentless winds, grasslands in Nebraska are burning. And arriving from 93 million miles away, a solar storm from an X-1.4 flare is quietly hammering Earth's magnetosphere. The United States is not just stepping into a week of bad weather. We are stepping into a compounding convergence of hazards. And what all of this adds up to is something forecasters are only beginning to say out loud. What truly terrifies the experts right now isn't the destructive power of a single, isolated storm. It is the terrifying realization that they are tracking a pattern that refuses to shut down. To understand the gravity of this convergence, we have to start with the data that triggered the alarm. The Storm Prediction Center, or SPC, is one of the most cautious scientific institutions in the United States. These are meteorologists who have spent their entire careers watching confident forecasts collapse into nothing and seemingly minor setups explode into catastrophe. Because of this, they do not use aggressive long-range probabilities unless something in the data is absolutely screaming at them. When they post a 15% severe probability 4 days in advance, that is not them hedging their bets. That is a signal. In the precise language of severe weather forecasting, 15% at an extended range means the atmosphere is not being subtle. And it tells us that the forecasting models, which frequently disagree and split into wildly different solutions depending on which one you trust, are actually talking to each other right now. The GFS and the ECMWF, two of the most powerful supercomputing forecasting systems on the planet, are telling essentially the exact same story. That level of alignment at day 4 should raise the hair on your arms. And then you look at the energy numbers. Convective Available Potential Energy, or CAPE, is the fuel gauge of the atmosphere. It measures how much potential energy is available to drive a thunderstorm violently upward. In a typical spring severe weather event, you might see CAPE values in the range of 1,000 to 2,000 joules per kilogram. That is more than enough to produce significant, damaging storms. The setup we are tracking right now is loading 3,000 joules per kilogram into the atmosphere. Let that land for a second. We are seeing near peak season instability. This is the kind of volatile, explosive energy usually reserved for late May or June in the southern plains. But it is materializing right now. The calendar says early April. The atmosphere did not get the memo. But here is where it gets more specific and infinitely more unsettling. When forecasters talk about storm initiation, the exact moment the atmosphere pulls the trigger, they usually deal in broad windows of uncertainty. A 6-hour window, an 8-hour window, or a general afternoon to evening time frame. For this specific event, the storm initiation window has been narrowed down to just 3 hours. 3. That level of precision does not come from luck. and it comes from a trigger mechanism that is unusually defined and fiercely predictable. The models are not just warning us that a storm is coming. They are showing us an atmospheric engine that is loaded with out-of-season fuel, perfectly aligned, and ready to fire with terrifying punctuality. And as the data shows, this engine isn't designed to fire just once. Part 3. The After Dark Problem. There is a deeply held public misunderstanding about severe weather. A comforting intuition that costs lives in setups exactly like this one. People naturally assume that storms are driven by the heat of the sun, and therefore, when the sun goes down, the atmosphere goes to sleep. That intuition is dangerously wrong for an organized severe weather pattern. What happens after sunset is that the atmosphere removes its brakes. During the day, friction from the Earth's surface slows the lower atmosphere down. But after dark, that friction layer collapses. A phenomenon known as the low-level jet awakens, a ribbon of fast-moving air rushing through the lower atmosphere. As it accelerates into the night, the directional wind shear improves drastically. The rotation potential for any supercell still alive at 10 p.m. does not weaken in the dark. It strengthens. This is the phase where the weather is no longer the only danger. At night, the human advantage evaporates. The visual cues that trigger our survival instincts, the rotating wall cloud, the ominous green sky, are entirely invisible. You are completely dependent on official warnings. But warning response rates plummet after midnight. People are asleep, phones are silenced. Even our technology develops a blind spot. Radar relies on a beam of energy. Because the Earth is curved, the further that beam travels, the higher it gets above the ground. If a storm is 100 miles away, the beam is scanning thousands of feet in the air, completely overshooting the critical low-level rotation where tornadoes actually form. A violent tornado can be on the ground in the dark, and the radar might only see a generic thunderstorm. Imagine a family in rural Oklahoma. They watched the evening news, saw the storm stay north, and went to bed feeling relieved. But in this relentless pattern, 1:30 a.m. is exactly when the low-level jet reaches its violent peak. Daytime is a battle against the atmosphere. Nighttime is a battle against fatigue, the limits of technology, and the silence of a sleeping house. Part 4. One system, multiple languages. To truly grasp the scale of the crisis we are tracking, you have to stop looking at these events in isolation. If you watch standard media coverage, you will see a fragmented picture. They present these as entirely separate tragedies. They are missing the anatomy of the chaos. This is not 4 different weather stories. This is a single, massive atmospheric engine, spanning the width of a continent, expressing itself in different hazard languages simultaneously. On its volatile eastern flank, along the surging dry line, the engine speaks the language of discrete supercells and tornadoes ripping through the plains. Further east, trapped in the cyclonic flow, it speaks the language of water. In western New York, 8 established river systems are simultaneously crossing flood stage. This is not localized flash flooding. This is a regional hydrologic failure. The soil was already saturated from previous weeks of rain. The precipitation doesn't soak in. It instantly redirects, turning quiet suburban neighborhoods into lakes. On the cold side of this exact same upper-level trough, the engine speaks the language of winter. Montana and Wyoming are disappearing under a foot of snow, battered by 40-mile-per-hour wind gusts. It is a blizzard descending on regions that had already begun thawing into spring. And on the stark, wind-swept western edge of the very same dry line that is initiating tornadoes in Texas, the engine speaks the language of fire. Grasslands in Nebraska are being consumed by rapidly spreading wildfires. The contrast is almost unbelievable, yet physically coherent. The exact same boundary that pulls Gulf moisture north to create thunderstorms on its east side is driving desiccating, fire-fanning winds on its west side. The flooding in New York is not separate from the fires in Nebraska or the tornadoes in Oklahoma. They are born from the exact same physical source. The sheer scale of managing all of these extremes at the exact same moment is about to push human infrastructure to a breaking point. Part 5. The compound anomaly. In the scientific literature of risk management, there is a specific term for what we are witnessing. It is called a compound event. It is not simply a bad week or an unfortunate coincidence. A compound event is the simultaneous or closely sequential occurrence of multiple hazardous conditions that interact in ways that amplify their combined impact on human systems, pushing them far beyond what any single hazard would produce in isolation. Spring tornadoes are to be expected. River flooding in April is a known variable. Late-season blizzards and dry-line fire weather are well within the historical climatology of the United States. The anomaly here is not the intensity of any single event. The anomaly is the absolute synchronicity. Right now, there are more than 300 active weather alerts blanketing the country from coast to coast. Look at this map. These are not isolated pockets of activity. They are fundamentally different hazard categories active at the exact same time, driven by the exact same atmospheric system, demanding entirely different protocols for survival. This creates a deeply insidious threat that has nothing to do with wind speeds or water levels. Alert fatigue. When warnings become constant background noise, their effectiveness degrades. The public simply does not have the cognitive bandwidth to process 3 simultaneous emergency protocols. Furthermore, human attention is a finite resource. It is an infrastructure just as critical as power lines and cell towers. The forecasters, the emergency managers, the storm spotters, they are being asked to allocate that finite attention across a spectrum of overlapping crises. A major severe weather outbreak is manageable. A regional flooding event is manageable. But when everything is live at once, the system is forced into a stress test of unprecedented proportions. And precisely at this moment of maximum vulnerability, a completely independent variable has entered the equation from 93 million miles away. Part 6. The invisible interference. While meteorologists have been tracking river gauges and dry lines, the Space Weather Prediction Center has been tracking something else entirely. An X-1.4 class solar flare, one of the strongest categories that exists, has launched a coronal mass ejection, or CME, directly toward Earth. It has arrived, triggering a G2 level geomagnetic storm. Let us be scientifically precise, because accuracy is our primary directive. A G2 geomagnetic storm does not cause severe weather on the surface. There is no established physical mechanism connecting a solar flare to the formation of a supercell over Oklahoma. They are independent physical systems with separate driving mechanisms, and conflating them would be a disservice to the science. But a geomagnetic storm does not need to create a tornado to make a tornado outbreak infinitely more dangerous. Our national warning apparatus is built on layers of communication. You see the outermost layer? The phone alerts, the sirens, the television broadcasts. Beneath that are the digital networks and cell towers, which routinely fail under high winds or lose power during extended outages. And underneath all of it, functioning as the ultimate fail-safe when modern infrastructure collapses, is the high-frequency, or HF, radio backbone. HF radio is not obsolete technology. It is the connective tissue of the storm spotter networks. It relies on bouncing signals off the ionosphere to communicate across vast distances without physical infrastructure. But when a CME impacts Earth, the ionosphere becomes violently turbulent. Instead of reflecting radio waves, it absorbs them. The signal goes up, and it does not come back down. This is known as a radio blackout. The X 1.4 flare is well within the range of events that have produced minor to moderate HF radio blackouts in the past. This is the reality of the compound event. The physical hazards are independent, but the human systems built to respond to them are entirely entangled. We now have an operational environment where the very communication backbone required to track nocturnal tornadoes is being stressed by solar activity at the exact moment we need it most. The system is handling it, but it is running at the absolute outer edge of what it was built for. Part 7. The pattern behind the pattern. When human beings are confronted with an overwhelming convergence of extremes, our deepest, most ancient instinct is to search for a hidden message. When floods, blizzards, fires, and solar storms arrive in perfect synchronicity, we desperately want to believe that the universe is signaling us. But here is the honest, scientifically grounded reality, offered without alarmism. The universe does not send messages. It operates. These physical systems evolve according to the laws of fluid dynamics and thermodynamics, entirely indifferent to the narratives we construct around them. The rigorous, tractable question is not whether this specific week was designed by some cosmic intelligence, whilst the right question is whether the background conditions of our planet are fundamentally shifting to make compound events like this more frequent. The data is answering that question. The Gulf of Mexico has been running anomalously warm this season. That is not a projection, it is a measurement confirmed across multiple independent data sets. Warmer ocean water means more evaporation, which loads more explosive moisture into the atmospheric conveyor belt that feeds severe weather over the plains. The jet stream is spending more time in highly amplified, blocking configurations. The fire weather season across the central United States is measurably longer than it was a generation ago. We cannot point to a single nocturnal tornado in Oklahoma and claim that climate change caused it. That is not how physics works. But we can state with absolute certainty that the stage is being redesigned. The historical baseline is warping, creating an environment where the atmosphere simply has more fuel to burn, resulting in multi-day, multi-hazard sieges that refuse to shut down. Part 8. The symbolic contrast. Right in the middle of this convergence, as all of these terrestrial systems are peaking at once, there is a profound and almost disorienting contrast taking place. While more than 300 active weather alerts blanket the country from coast to coast, while rivers climb their banks and supercells rotate in the dark, 4 human beings are strapping themselves into a rocket. They are running through their final pre-launch checklists with the methodical calm of professionals who have trained for years for exactly this moment. They are leaving. Now, as they arc through the absolute silence of cislunar space on the first crewed lunar mission in over half a century, they will look back at the Earth. And from their vantage point, 250,000 miles away, none of this chaos will be visible. The 300 active weather alerts will be invisible. The tornado warning polygons, the flooding rivers, the raging fires, and the blinding blizzards will simply not exist to the naked eye. The geomagnetic storm currently hammering our communication infrastructure will only appear as a subtle, beautiful auroral glow draped over the poles of an impossibly quiet blue marble. From up there, the Earth is breathtakingly peaceful. From down here, trapped beneath the atmosphere, it is a machine running at maximum, devastating capacity. Conclusion: the weight of convergence. Ultimately, what makes this week so deeply unsettling is not the magnitude of any single component. It is the inescapable reality of the convergence. It is the stark realization that an extratropical cyclone, a blocked atmospheric trough, a warming ocean, and a solar flare can all align on the exact same narrow window of days. They are independent physical systems, blind to one another. Yet they possess the collective power to push human infrastructure, emergency resources, and our finite capacity for attention to the absolute brink. Perhaps this week is just an outlier, a rare and unfortunate roll of the meteorological dice. Or perhaps it is a window into the new normal, a future where the gap between what the calendar predicts and what the atmosphere delivers continues to widen. Whatever the answer, nature has just delivered a masterful and humbling demonstration. It has reminded us that despite our technology, our radars, and our rockets, we remain astonishingly fragile. The most terrifying aspect of the storm is no longer the wind or the rain. It is the realization of what happens when the planet decides to be loud in every register all at once. And the only question left is, are we truly prepared to listen? Epilogue: the anatomy of the aftermath. Eventually, the atmosphere exhausts itself. The trough that held the continent hostage finally breaks its anchor and drifts harmlessly over the Atlantic. The Gulf moisture conveyor belt is severed by an advancing dome of high pressure. The coronal mass ejection washes over the Earth and dissipates into the outer solar system. The flashing red, green, and orange polygons that blanketed the national map simply expire. The 300 active alerts vanish. The sirens stop screaming. But the silence that follows a compound event is not a signal that the danger has passed. It is the beginning of the forensic accounting. For the people on the ground, this is the agonizing phase of recovery. But for the scientific community, for the meteorologists and emergency managers, this is when the true scale of the failure or success is meticulously measured. This is the post-mortem. Right now, National Weather Service damage assessment teams are walking through debris fields in Oklahoma and Texas. They are not just looking at broken lumber. They are conducting meticulous forensic engineering. They are measuring the sheer force required to bend steel girders and scour asphalt from the ground, trying to determine if the nocturnal supercells produced EF4 or EF5 damage hidden in the dark. They are matching ground scars to radar velocity couplets, trying to understand how quickly the low-level jets spun these monsters up while the population slept. Simultaneously, hydrologists in western New York are measuring high water marks on bridge abutments. They are studying the saturated soil profiles, not realizing that our current flood models severely underestimated how rapidly a watershed can fail when the earth beneath it refuses to absorb another drop of water. And in the silent server rooms of the Space Weather Prediction Center, technicians are poring over the telemetry logs from the HF radio networks. They are trying to answer the critical, terrifying question we asked days ago. When the tornado warnings were issued at 2 a.m., did the ionospheric interference from the solar flare cause the spotter networks to go blind? Did the compound event actually sever our final lifeline of communication? The data they extract from those logs will dictate how we rebuild our emergency response protocols for the next decade. Because that is the ultimate lesson of the compound anomaly. We build our infrastructure, our power grids, our supply chains, and our warning systems for isolated events. We build a levee for the flood. We build a siren for the tornado. We build a satellite for the solar flare. We engineer for the average distribution of bad days. But we do not engineer for the convergence. The limits of human infrastructure were not tested by the wind speed or the volume of rain. They were tested by the absolute exhaustion of finite resources. The alert fatigue that numbed the public. The dispatchers who had to choose which crisis to prioritize. The sheer, overwhelming cognitive load of fighting a multi-front war against an atmosphere that refused to compromise. The storms have passed, but the background conditions that birthed them remain completely unaltered. The Gulf of Mexico is still boiling with anomalous heat, when the Arctic temperature gradients are still warping the jet stream. The solar maximum is still building toward its peak. The engine is simply idling, waiting for the next trigger. We survived this convergence. The systems bent, and in some places, they broke. But society held together. The skies are clear today, but the data tells us, with cold, objective certainty, that the rules of engagement have permanently changed. Take a deep breath. Assess your preparations, and keep looking at the data, because the atmosphere is already loading the next sequence. Addendum: the engine beneath the chaos. We have spent the last hour dissecting the sky. We have analyzed the blocked troughs, the screaming low-level jets, and the violent atmospheric convergence that brought the continent to its knees. But there is a fundamental rule in investigative meteorology that is too often ignored. The atmosphere has no memory. It is chaotic, reactive, and entirely dependent on the surfaces it touches. The atmosphere is not the engine. The atmosphere is merely the exhaust. If you want to understand why the sky is seemingly losing its mind, why early April feels like late May, why the Gulf of Mexico is pumping out-of-season supercells with apocalyptic efficiency, you cannot look up. You have to look down, deep beneath the surface of the water, where the true thermal memory of our planet is stored. What you are looking at is the AMOC, the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation. For thousands of years, it has been the primary cardiovascular system of the Earth's climate. It functions as a colossal planetary conveyor belt, pulling warm, tropical water from the equator up the east coast of the United States, across the Atlantic toward Europe, where it cools, sinks, and flows back south along the ocean floor. It is the reason Europe has a temperate climate instead of being a frozen tundra. It is the reason the East Coast sea levels have historically remained stable. And crucially, it is the mechanism that regulates the thermal battery of the Gulf of Mexico. But the data, the cold, hard, peer-reviewed oceanographic measurements, is screaming a warning that makes a day 4 severe weather probability look like a minor inconvenience. The AMOC is slowing down. Because of the unprecedented melting of the Greenland ice sheet, billions of tons of fresh, buoyant water are pouring into the North Atlantic. This fresh water does not sink. It acts as a massive thermal cap, disrupting the overturning mechanism. The engine is choking on its own meltwater. And when a planetary conveyor belt slows down, the cargo it carries begins to back up. Where does that warm, tropical water go when it cannot efficiently flow north? It pools. It backs up along the eastern seaboard, and it dramatically superheats the Gulf of Mexico. That angry, persistent crimson anomaly we saw driving the 3,000 joules of Cape in our compound event? That is not a random fluctuation. That is the backed-up thermal exhaust of a failing oceanic current. The storms we just analyzed were not an isolated tragedy. They were the atmospheric symptom of an oceanographic disease. When the AMOC shifts, it does not just ruin a weekend in Oklahoma. It physically displaces the thermal equator of the entire planet. It alters the monsoon cycles in India and West Africa, which dictate the food supply for over 1 billion human beings. It accelerates sea level rise on the American East Coast, threatening trillions of dollars of coastal infrastructure with routine, sunny day flooding. We are watching the dominoes fall in real time. The compound weather anomaly we just survived was merely a localized stress test. It was a warning shot fired across the bow of human civilization. The mathematical models that govern our agriculture, our supply chains, our power grids, and our insurance markets are all based on the deeply flawed assumption that the ocean's cardiovascular system will function tomorrow exactly as it functioned 100 years ago. That assumption is now obsolete. The baseline has shifted, and human infrastructure is built for a world that no longer exists. You prepare for a tornado by going underground. You prepare for a flood by moving to higher ground. You prepare for a grid failure by buying a generator and stockpiling supplies. But how do you prepare when the fundamental geographic geometry of the Earth's climate begins to rewrite itself? The sky has delivered its violent warning, but the ocean holds the final verdict. And right now, beneath the crashing waves and the silence of the deep, the ocean is holding its breath. Part 9. The Deep Earth Resonance. We have looked to the violently unstable sky, and we have looked to the stagnating currents of the ocean. We have traced the flow of chaotic energy from a blocked atmospheric trough down to the suffocating AMOC in the Atlantic. But to truly grasp the magnitude of the systemic shift we are living through, we must look deeper. Earth is a closed, intricately connected system. Energy and mass do not simply disappear, they transfer. When the atmosphere overheats and the oceans redistribute their weight, the physical stress of our changing world has to go somewhere. It transfers downward into the very bedrock of the planet. We are entering an era that geophysicists quietly refer to as a period of crustal adjustment. And it is adding a terrifying new variable to the equation of compound disasters. Consider the melting of the major ice sheets. For millennia, billions of tons of ice have pressed down on the continental plates, locking them into a state of immense pressure and equilibrium. But as that ice melts at an unprecedented rate, and that staggering mass of water flows into the global ocean basin, a phenomenon known as isostatic rebound occurs. The land masses, freed from the crushing weight of the ice, literally bounce back. They shift upward. This is not a slow, silent, harmless process. It is a violent redistribution of planetary mass. It alters the stress fields on tectonic plates thousands of miles away. It applies unimaginable torque to the Earth's crust, awakening fault lines that have been dormant for centuries. Look at the recent seismic data along the Ring of Fire. We are witnessing a statistically significant uptick in seismic unrest, earthquake swarms in regions not historically known for tectonic violence. What we are observing is not necessarily the buildup to a single apocalyptic Hollywood earthquake. It is arguably something much more insidious. It is a persistent, low-grade fever of the Earth's crust. Volcanic systems that have slept for generations are showing signs of magma intrusion. Microquakes are fracturing the bedrock beneath our cities. The Earth is groaning, rebalancing itself to accommodate the new thermal and mass realities of the surface. Now, apply the brutal logic of the compound event to this new geological variable. Our modern civilization is built on a concept called the just-in-time economy. We rely on a hyper-efficient, unfragile web of logistics to deliver what we need, exactly when we need it. This infrastructure possesses zero slack. It is profoundly brittle. Imagine the scenario we tracked this week, a multi-day severe weather siege overloading the emergency response of the plains, coupled with a solar flare degrading communications. Now, inject a moderate, magnitude 6.5 earthquake into that exact same timeline. It doesn't need to be a civilization-ending quake. It only needs to be strong enough to collapse a few critical highway overpasses rupture a major natural gas pipeline, or sever the fiber optic cables that coordinate the regional power grid. When a geological event intersects with an atmospheric anomaly, the math of disaster multiplies. A storm delays the earthquake rescue. The earthquake destroys the shelters needed for the storm. The power grid failure blinds the radar systems needed to track the incoming weather. Emergency managers are suddenly blind, deaf, and paralyzed. This is the ultimate fragility of human infrastructure. It is the realization that the concrete beneath our feet and the wires above our heads are utterly defenseless against a planet that is simultaneously rebalancing its sky, its oceans, and its crust. We have spent centuries assuming the ground would always hold steady and the seasons would always obey the calendar. That assumption was a luxury of a quieter geological epoch. That epoch is over. We must now prepare for an era defined by the relentless intersection of atmospheric rage, oceanic failure, and geological unrest. The systems are aligning. The only remaining variable in this planetary equation is our capacity to adapt. Part 10. The cognitive fracture. We have mapped the physics of the sky, the thermal exhaustion of the oceans, and the agonizing groan of the tectonic plates. We have established that the Earth is actively transitioning into a higher energy, highly volatile state. But there is one final system we must analyze to complete the anatomy of the compound disaster. It is the most complex, the most unpredictable, and ultimately, the most fragile system of all. The human mind. Look at this intersection. Look at the immense, coordinated effort of millions of people moving through their daily routines. They are driving to work, buying coffee, checking their retirement accounts, and planning vacations for next year. And they are doing this because the fundamental contract of modern civilization is built on a psychological illusion, the illusion of permanence. We are biologically wired to believe that tomorrow will look exactly like yesterday. In sociology, there is a term for this blind spot. It is called shifting baseline syndrome. Shifting baseline syndrome describes how we normalize the abnormal. 30 years ago, a Category 5 hurricane rapidly intensifying overnight, or a 3,000 joules severe weather outbreak in early April, would have been classified as a historic, generational anomaly. Today, it is just the lead story on a Tuesday. We adjust our baseline. We accept the new extreme as the new normal, entirely missing the fact that the baseline itself is in a state of terminal collapse. This cognitive fracture is precisely why our institutions are failing to communicate the true scale of the risk. The National Weather Service, FEMA, and local governments operate under a mandate to manage public safety, which intrinsically means preventing panic. Their communication strategies are designed for discrete, survivable events. They tell you to shelter in place for the tornado, to boil your water after the flood, and to wait for the power company to restore the grid. But how does a government agency issue an alert for a systemic, planetary-scale realignment? What is the emergency protocol for the collapse of the Atlantic overturning circulation or a synchronized crustal adjustment? There isn't one. Because managing a compound, indefinite crisis requires acknowledging that the system itself is no longer capable of returning to a stable baseline. This creates a profound psychological burden on the observers. The scientists, the data analysts, and the individuals who have dared to look past the illusion of permanence. They are experiencing the Cassandra complex. They have the data. They see the convergence. They know the math dictates that the infrastructure will not hold. Yet, they must walk through a society that refuses to acknowledge the tectonic shift happening beneath its feet. If you are watching this, you likely share that burden. You look at the sky, the oceans, and the supply chains, and you see the fragility that others choose to ignore. You are not paranoid. You are simply reading the telemetry. The era of preparing for an event is over. An event implies a beginning, a middle, and an end. An event implies that a return to normal is possible. What we are facing is not an event. It is a condition. A condition requires a fundamental rewiring of how we live. It requires transitioning from reliance on fragile, just-in-time supply chains to localized, redundant resilience. It requires moving from a mindset of expectation, expecting the grid to hold, expecting the authorities to arrive, to a mindset of absolute self-reliance and community fortitude. The planet has already made its transition. The atmosphere, the ocean, and the crust have voted. The convergence is here. The only question remaining is whether our minds can accept the new mathematics of survival before the next equation solves itself. Part 11. The Cosmic Blind Spot. We have dissected the fragile, boiling systems inside our atmosphere. We have peered into the dark, stagnating currents of the oceans and measured the grinding pressure of the tectonic plates. We have even analyzed the psychological limits of the human mind when confronted with a collapsing baseline. But if we are conducting a truly comprehensive audit of our vulnerability, there is one final domain we must address. It is the domain we look at every single night, yet fundamentally ignore: the orbital perimeter. In the language of disaster preparedness, we focus almost entirely on the threats generated by the planet itself. But Earth is not a closed system. We are traveling at 67,000 miles per hour through a cosmic shooting gallery. Every day, tons of interplanetary debris strike our atmosphere, while most of it burns up harmlessly. But occasionally, the universe delivers a brutal reminder of our absolute, inescapable exposure. Enter the bolide, a massive fireball meteor that detonates in the stratosphere with the kinetic energy of a tactical weapon. Now, apply the unforgiving mathematics of the compound event to this celestial variable. Imagine the exact week we just tracked. Severe weather outbreaks tearing across the plains, power grid failures plunging cities into darkness, and alert fatigue reaching critical mass among the population. Now, into that exact environment of sheer terrestrial chaos, a near-Earth object slips through our early warning network. This is entirely possible, especially if the object approaches from the direction of the sun, our ultimate glaring blind spot. It detonates over a region already pushed to the brink by storms and blackouts. It does not need to be a civilization-ending asteroid. A localized bolide explosion, or even a highly visible, unexplained aerial phenomenon, UAP, caught on weather cameras during a crisis, acts as the ultimate psychological accelerant. When the ground is shaking, the water is rising, and the sky suddenly ignites with an unexplained, blinding force. The human response shifts instantly from organized survival to primal panic. In the context of an overwhelmed grid and a chaotic environment, people do not assume it is a meteor. They assume the worst. They assume it is an attack. The fragile cognitive baseline we discussed earlier shatters completely. We rely on a delicate network of sky surveys and observatories to track near-Earth objects. But just like our weather radars and our high-frequency radio networks, these observatories require stable terrestrial infrastructure. They require continuous power, uninterrupted data links, and focused human attention. If a terrestrial compound anomaly degrades the power grid, our planetary early warning system goes utterly blind. We are essentially driving a fragile vehicle at hypersonic speeds through a debris field, relying on a windshield that we know is cracking under the immense pressure of the storm inside the car. This is the final, inescapable layer of the prepper mindset. True resilience requires acknowledging that we are entirely exposed, not just to the violent temperament of our changing home world, but to the cold, random indifference of the cosmos. The terrestrial systems are aligning. The loss of the planetary engine is overheating. The orbital path is crowded. The era of localized, predictable, and manageable emergencies is a relic of a quieter past. We have officially entered the age of the compounding anomaly, where the sky, the earth, the oceans, and the void all demand our attention at the exact same time. The universe does not care if we are ready. The only rational response left to us is to observe, to prepare, and to absolutely refuse to look away.